Hi and welcome to Better Experiments. I'm Jacob Lanowski from Good UI, and I wanted to highlight an experiment that's being designed. And the idea is twofold. One is to share how I would approach the experiment design and through it teach everything I know about test setup. And second, also collect some of your input and open up the whole process. And perhaps if some of you have better ideas of how to set up the test, what to measure, what to change, maybe provide your input as a comment, and maybe we can learn from that all together. And some of the things that we'll be looking at today will be test structure, or the actual segmenting, the metrics, and triggers. So let's start with test design.
Test design.
So here we can see how the test is structured. It's using Good UI Catalyst, which is an openly available Figma template I've been developing over the years. The essence of this setup is that there's three sections. On the left here, we see the kind of inspiration exploration section. It contains things that kind of inspire the experiment, any kind of data points, historical experiments, patterns, any user research. It also contains concepts that were explored but never made it into the test. So they're outside, they've been pushed to the side here. The middle is the core, where we can actually see the control and the variations. And future ideas are any kind of future concepts that maybe we came up with during this time, but they're outside of the experiment for now. So looking more closely what inspired the experiment is the sticky call to action pattern, which is the simple idea of nudging consumers to kind of add to cart and hopefully increase sales that way. Also quite visible in this setup here are multiple screenshots labeled as A's, which are essentially control screenshots of what the current site looks like, of what these product pages look like. And I find it's beneficial to have these available because they remind you kind of what to deal with and how to structure experiment, what all these different little nuances are. For example, some products only have a single button for online orders, whereas other products have an additional button for placing pickup orders. Or perhaps there's some products which are out of stock and you cannot actually order anything at that point. And this brings us to a potential trigger situation. These are excluded from this experiment. So here we can actually see the B variation that's proposed. And the changes are the addition of a buy button, which basically nudges people to add an item to cart. It also suggests to add the price total so that people can make that decision a little bit easier, so they're reminded of what the cost there is. As well as a third state here, post adding something to cart, there's a suggestion to also provide feedback so that the item was added to cart, but also turn that into a link and remove the friction and send people to the next step or to the shopping cart. The C variation is a very similar build on the B variant, in that it intensifies the feedback state here. So using a higher contrast color as well as a button instead of a link and sending people to checkout, hopefully the idea is to allow people to kind of proceed forward and nudge them even further in the direction of checking out. And the D variant takes this even further by removing the feedback step altogether and basically sending people to check out immediately after they click buy. So all in all, with these three variants that all share that kind of sticky button, each variation has something else adjusted beside it. And hopefully that will paint a better picture in this experiment of what may work better, worse, and so forth. And on that note, also let's have a quick look at custom metrics. What I mean by custom metrics in this case is basically taking ownership and setting up these additional behavior metrics on each experiment. And that way, we'll basically have more information to work with when it finishes. As an example, this M3 custom metric requests to track button clicks of this element that has been added. M6 is another custom metrics for checking visits to shopping cart. M4 is a similar checkout visit interaction, as well as a comparison of more standard purchase paths from the actual upper area. So hopefully that way we'll get a better sense of from where people are starting purchases and if they're finishing or not. Another important thing to look out and track are triggers. Triggers are basically a way of determining when to start the experiment. If we exclude people who do not see the change or do not experience the change, we can speed up the experiment by increasing statistical power. So in our case here, we can see the page level looks something like this, and there's no floating navigation at this point. And of course, there is the additional existing primary buttons from which people can buy. However, our experiment only starts further down when people scroll a little bit further. So we know that not 100% of the people will scroll, only a some segment. And by setting the trigger further down, we're excluding all those people that have not experienced the change. So this is the suggested custom trigger, denoted in purple and expressed here. More so to remove additional noise, we're also excluding any kind of products which are not in stock, because of course those cannot be acted on. So yeah, with this setup, hopefully this will remove some noise and magnify the signal if anything's there. And this leads us to segments. Custom segments are a form of insurance, I guess. If we believe that the experiment might only work for some specific situations or might be more effective somewhere else, by kind of thinking through some of the segments and setting them up beforehand, before pressing play on the experiment, we can capture that and detect that instead of thinking about that later. And to give you an example of this, some products come with additional product choices or options such as sizing or quantities, whereas other products don't have that. And one belief here is that the products with the actual additional choices maybe have some additional friction before people are ready to add to cart. So perhaps the sticky call to action pattern may be more effective on simpler products. And by setting the segment up, maybe we'll set ourselves up for a partial win if that's the case, as opposed to having just a one generic test setup. Or another example of segmenting that we want to incorporate in this experiment is the page length segment. So looking at some product pages, some are longer and some are shorter. And perhaps the belief here is that on shorter pages, a sticky call to action might be less effective, whereas on longer ones, perhaps it's more effective. So by setting this up again, maybe we'll uncover a partial win, or we'll be surprised. We'll see. So yeah, hopefully this was inspirational and encourages you to run some interesting experiments on your own. And of course, I'd love to hear your feedback. If you have suggestions, comments, how you'd set up the experiment, please leave a comment, and yeah, maybe we can have an open discussion about it. All right. Thanks for watching. Cheers.